The word of our Father in heaven came to me. Now, you, O mortal, intone a dirge over Tyre. Say to Tyre, O you who dwell at the gateway of the sea, who trade with the peoples on many coastlands, thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, O Tyre, you boasted, I am perfect in beauty. Your frontiers were on the high seas. Your builders perfected your beauty. From cypress trees of Sinar, they fashioned your planks. They took a cedar from Lebanon to make a mast for you. From oak trees of Bashan, they made your oars of boxwood. From the isles of Kittim, inlaid with ivory, they made your decks. Embroidered linen from Egypt was the cloth that served you for sails of blue and purple. From the coast of Elisha were your awnings, the inhabitants of Sidon and Arvad were your rowers, your skilled men. O Tyre were within you. They were your pilots. Gabal's elders and craftsmen were within you, making your repairs. All the ships of the sea with their crews were in your harbor to traffic in your wares. Men of Paras, Lud, and Put were in your army, your fighting men. They hung shields and helmets in your midst. They lent splendor to your men of Arvad and Halek, manned your walls all around, and men of Gamad were stationed in your towers. They hung their quivers all about your walls. They perfected your beauty. Tarshish traded with you because of your wealth of all kinds of goods. They bartered silver, iron, tin, and lead for your wares. Javan, Tubal, and Meshech, they were your merchants. They trafficked with you in human beings and copper utensils. From Beth Togama, they bartered horses, horsemen, and mules for your wares. The people of the Don were your merchants. Many coastlands traded under your rule and rendered you tribute in ivory, tusk, and ebony. Aram traded with you because of your wealth of merchandise, dealing with you in turquoise, purple stuff, embroidery, fine linen, coral, and agate. Jehudah and the land of Israel were your merchants. They trafficked with you in wheat of Meneth, in Panag, honey, oil, and palm. Because of your wealth of merchandise, because of your great wealth, Damascus traded with you in Helbon, wine, and white wool. Vedan and Javan from Uzal traded for your wares. They trafficked with you in polished iron. Kasean and Kalmas, the Dan, was your merchant in saddlecloths for riding. Arabia and all Kedar's chiefs were traders under your rule. They traded with you in lambs, rams, and goats. The merchants of Sheba and Ramah were your merchants. They bartered for your wares all the finest spices, all kinds of precious stones and gold. Haran, Kana, and Eden, the merchants of Sheba. Assyria and Chilmad traded with you. These were your merchants in choice fabrics, embroidered cloaks of blue, and many colored carpets, tied up with cords and preserved with cedar among your wares. The ships of Tarshish were in the service of your trade, so you were full and richly laden on the high seas. Your oarsmen brought you out into the mighty waters. The tempest wrecked you on the high seas. Your wealth, your wares, your merchandise, your sailors, and your pilots, the men who made your repairs, those who carried on your traffic, and all the fighting men within you, all the multitude within you shall go down into the depths of the sea on the day of your downfall, at the outcry of your pilots. The billows shall heave, and all the oarsmen and mariners, all the pilots of the sea, shall come down from their ships and stand on the ground. They shall raise their voices over you and cry out bitterly. They shall cast dust on their heads and strew ashes on themselves. On your account they shall make bald patches on their heads. They shall gird themselves with sackcloth. They shall weep over you, brokenhearted. Okay. They shall weep over you, brokenhearted. With bitter lamenting they shall intone a dirge over you as they wail, and lament for you thus. Who was like Tyre when she was silenced in the midst of the sea, when your wares were unloaded from the seas? You satisfied many peoples with your great wealth and merchandise. You enriched the kings of the earth. But when you were wrecked on the seas, and the deep waters sank your merchandise, and all the crew aboard you, all the inhabitants of the coastlands are appalled over you. Their kings are aghast, their faces contorted. The merchants among the peoples hissed at you. You have become a horror, and have ceased to be forever. The word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal. Say to the prince of Tyre, Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, because you have been so haughty and have said, I am a God. I sit enthroned like a God in the heart of the seas, whereas you are not a God, but a man. Though you deemed your mind equal to a God's, yes, you are wiser than Daniel. In no hidden matter can anyone compare to you. By your shrewd understanding you have gained riches, and have amassed gold and silver in your treasuries. By your great shrewdness in trade you have increased your wealth, and you have grown haughty because of your wealth. Surely thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, because you have deemed your mind equal to a God's, I swear I will bring against you strangers, the most ruthless of nations. They shall unsheath their swords against your prized shrewdness, and they shall strike down your splendor. They shall bring you down to the pit. In the heart of the sea you shall die. The death of the slain, will you stay? Will you still say, I am a God before your slayers? When you are proved a man, not a God, at the hands of those who strike you down, by the hands of strangers you shall die. The death of the uncircumcised, for I have spoken, declares our Father in heaven, Elohim. The word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, intone a dirge over the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, you were the seal of perfection, or because if you were a God, you would never die. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and flawless in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone was your adornment. Carnelian, chrysolite, and amethyst, pearl, lapis, lazuli, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald, and gold, beautifully wrought for you. Mine for you prepared the day you were created. I created you as a cherub, with outstretched shielding wings, and you resided on Elohim's holy mountain. You walked among stones of fire. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until wrongdoing was found in you. By your fair flung commerce, you were filled with lawlessness, and you sinned, so I have struck you down from the mountain of Elohim, and I have destroyed you, O shielding cherub, from among the stones of fire. You grew haughty because of your beauty. You debased your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I have cast you to the ground. I have made you an object for kings to stare at. By the greatness of your guilt, through the dishonesty of your trading, you desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made a fire issue from you, and it has devoured you. I have reduced you to ashes on the ground. In the sight of all who behold you, all who knew you among the peoples, are appalled at your doom. You have become a horror, and have ceased to be forever. The word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, set your face toward Sidon and prophesy against her. Say thus, said our Father in heaven, Elohim, I am going to deal with you, O Sidon. I will gain glory in your midst, and they shall know that I am our Father in heaven. When I wreak punishment upon her, and show myself holy through her, I will let pestilence loose against her, and bloodshed into her streets, and the slain shall fall in her midst. When the sword comes upon her from all sides, and they shall know that I am our Father in heaven, then shall the house of Israel no longer be afflicted with prickling briars and lacerating thorns from all the neighbors who despise them, and they shall know that I am our Father in heaven, Elohim. Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, when I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among which they have been dispersed, and have shown myself holy through them in the sight of the nations, they shall settle on their own soil, which I gave to my servant Jacob, and they shall dwell on it in security. They shall build houses and plant vineyards, and shall dwell on it in security. When I have meted out punishment to all those about those who despise them, and they shall know that our Father in heaven, am their Elohim. In the 10th year, on the 12th day of the 10th month, the word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, turn your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Mitzrayim, Egypt. Speak these words. Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, I am going to deal with you, O Pharaoh, king of Egypt, mighty monster sprawling in your channels, who said, my Nile is my own. I made it for myself. I will put hooks in your jaws and make the fish of your channels cling to your scales. I will haul you up from your channels with all the fish of your channels clinging to your scales, and I will fling you into the desert with all the fish of your channels. You shall be left lying in the open, ungathered and unburied. I have given you as food to the beasts of the earth and the birds of the sky. Then all the inhabitants of Egypt shall know that I am my Father in heaven, because you were a staff of reed to the house of Israel. When they grasped you with the hand, you would splinter and wound all their shoulders. And when they leaned on you, you would break and make all their loins unsteady. As surely thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, lo, I will bring a sword against you, and will cut off man and beast from you, so that the land of Egypt shall fall into desolation and ruin. And they shall know that I am our Father in heaven, because he boasted, the Nile is mine, and I made it. As surely I am going to deal with you in your channels, and I will reduce the land of Egypt to utter ruin and desolation, from Migdol to Syene, all the way to the border of Nubia. No foot of man shall traverse it. and no foot of beast shall traverse it, and it shall remain uninhabited for 40 years. For 40 years I will make the land of Egypt the most desolate of desolate lands, and its cities shall be the most desolate of ruined cities. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them throughout the countries. Further, thus said our Father in heaven Elohim, after a period of 40 years, I will gather the Egyptians from the peoples among whom they were dispersed. I will restore the fortunes of the Egyptians and bring them back to the land of their origin, the land of Pathros, and there they shall be a lowly kingdom. It shall be the lowliest of all the kingdoms, and shall not master it over the nations again. I will reduce the Egyptians so that they shall have no dominion over the nations. Never again shall they be the trust of the house of Israel, recalling its guilt and having turned to them. And they shall know that I am our Father in heaven Elohim. In the 27th year, on the first day of the first month, the word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal King Nebuchadnezzar, and Babylon has made his army expend his vast labor on Tyre. Every head is rubbed bald and every shoulder scraped, but he and his army have had no return for the labor he expended on Tyre. As surely thus said our Father in heaven Elohim, I will give the land of Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He shall carry off her wealth and take her spoil and seize her treasure, and she shall be the recompense of his army as the wage for which he labored for what they did for me. I give him the land of Egypt, declares our Father in heaven Elohim. On that day I will endow the house of Israel with strength, and you shall be vindicated among them, and they shall know that I am our Father in heaven. The word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, prophesy and say, thus said our Father in heaven Elohim, well, alas for the day, for a day is near, a day of our Father in heaven is near. It will be a day of cloud, an hour of invading nations. A sword shall pierce Egypt, and Nubia shall be seized with trembling when men fall slain in Egypt, and her wealth is seized, and her foundations are overthrown. Nubia put in Lud, and all the mixed populations in Cub. And the inhabitants of the allied country shall fall by the sword with them. Thus said our Father in heaven, those who support Egypt shall fall, and her proud strength shall sink. There they shall fall by the sword from Migdol to Syene, declares our Father in heaven Elohim. They shall be the most desolate of desolate lands, and her cities shall be the most ruined of cities. When I set fire to Egypt, and all who help her are broken, thus they shall know that I am our Father in heaven. On that day messengers shall set out at my bidding to strike terror into confident Nubia, and they shall be seized with trembling of Egypt's day of doom, for it is at hand. Thus said our Father in heaven Elohim, I will put an end to the wealth of Egypt through King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He together with his troops, the most ruthless of the nations, shall be brought to ravage the land, and they shall unsheath the sword against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. I will turn the channels into dry ground, and I will deliver the land into the hands of evil men. I will lay waste the land and everything in it by the hands of strangers. I, our Father in heaven, have spoken. Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, I will destroy the fetishes and make an end of the idols in Noph, and no longer shall there be a prince in the land of Egypt. And I will strike the land of Egypt with fear. I will lay Patharon waste. I will set fire to Zoan, and I will execute judgment on No. I will pour out my anger upon Sin, the stronghold of Egypt, and I will destroy the wealth of No. I will set fire to Egypt. Sin shall writhe in anguish, and No shall be torn apart, and Noph shall face adversaries in broad daylight. The young men of Havan and Paseth shall fall by the sword, and those towns shall go into captivity. In Taphanes daylight shall be withheld. When I break there the power of Egypt, and there her proud strength comes to an end. The city itself shall be covered with cloud, and its daughter towns shall go into captivity. Thus I will execute judgment on Egypt, and they shall know that I am my Father in heaven. In the 11th year, on the 7th day of the first month, the word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. It has not been bound up to be healed, nor firmly bandaged to make it strong enough to grasp the sword. Assuredly, thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, I am going to deal with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I will break his arms, both the sound one and the one injured, and make the sword drop from his hands. I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them throughout the countries. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon and put my sword in his hand, and I will break the arms of Pharaoh, and he shall groan before him with the groans of one struck down. I will make firm the arms of the king of Babylon, but the arms of Pharaoh shall fail. And they shall know that I am my Father in heaven when I put my sword into the hand of King Babylon, and he lifts it against the land of Egypt. I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them throughout the countries. Thus they shall know that I am my Father in heaven. In the 11th year, on the first day of the third month, the word of our Father in heaven came to me. O mortal, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and his hordes, who was more comparable to you in greatness. Assyria was a cedar in Lebanon, with beautiful branches and shady thickets of lofty stature. With its top among leafy trees, waters nourished it. The deep made it grow tall, washing with its streams the place where it was planted, making its channels well up. To all the trees of the field, therefore it exceeded in stature. All the trees of the field, its branches multiplied, and its boughs grew long, because of the abundant water that welled up for it. In its branches nested all the birds of the sky. All the beasts of the field bore their young under its boughs, and in its shadow lived all the great nations. It was beautiful in its height, in the length of its branches, because its stock stood by abundant waters. Cedars in the garden of Elohim could not compare with it. Cypresses could not match its boughs, and plane trees could not vie with its branches. No tree in the garden of Elohim was its peer in beauty. I made it beautiful in a profusion of its branches, and all the trees of Eden envied it in the garden of Elohim. Assuredly, thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, because it towered high in its stature and thrust its top up among the leafy trees, and it was arrogant in its height. I delivered it into the hands of the mightiest of nations. They treated it as befitted its wickedness. I banished it. Strangers, the most ruthless of nations, cut it down and abandoned it. Its branches fell on the mountains, and in every valley its boughs were splintered. In every watercourse of the earth, and all the peoples of the earth departed from its shade and abandoned it. Upon its fallen trunk, all the birds of the sky nest, and all the beasts of the field lodge among its boughs, so that no trees by water should exalt themselves in stature, or set their tops among the leafy trees, and that no well-watered tree may reach up to them in height, for they are all consigned to death, to the lowest part of the netherworld, together with human beings who descended to the pit. Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, on the day it went down to Sheol. I closed the deep over it and covered it. I held back its streams, and the great waters were checked. I made Lebanon mourn deeply for it, and all the trees of the field languished on its account. I made nations quake at the crash of its fall when I cast it down to Sheol with those who descend into the pit, and all the trees of Eden, the choicest and best of Lebanon, all that were well watered, were consoled in the lowest part of the netherworld. They also descended with it into Sheol, to those slain by the sword, together with its supporters. They who had lived under its shadow among the nations. Now you know who was comparable to you in glory and greatness among the trees of Eden, and you too shall be brought down with the trees of Eden to the lowest part of the netherworld. You shall lie among the uncircumcised, and those slain by the sword. Such shall be the fate of Pharaoh and all his hoarders, declares our Father in heaven, Elohim. In the 12th year, on the first day of the 12th month, the word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, and tone and dirge over Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Say to him, O great beast among the nations, you are doomed. You are like the dragon in the sea, thrusting through their streams, stirring up the water with your feet and muddying their streams. Thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, I will cast my net over you in an assembly of many peoples, and you shall be hauled up in my toils. And I will fling you to the ground, hurl you upon the open field. I will cause all the birds of the sky to settle upon you. I will cause the beasts of all the earth to batten on you. I will cast your carcass upon the hills, and fill the valleys with your rotting flesh. I will drench the earth with your oozing blood upon the hills, and the watercourses shall be filled with your gorge. In your snuff that I will cover the sky and darken its stars. I will cover the sun with clouds, and the moon shall not give its light. And the lights that shine in the sky will darken above you, and I will bring darkness upon your land, declares our Father in heaven, Elohim. I will vex the hearts of many peoples when I bring your shattered remnants among the nations to countries which you never knew. I will strike many peoples with horror over your fate, and their kings shall be aghast over you. When I brandish my sword before them, they shall tremble continually, each man for his own life, on the day of your downfall. For thus said our Father in heaven, Elohim, the sword of the king of Babylon shall come upon you. I will cause your multitude to fall by the swords of warriors, all the most ruthless among the nations. They shall ravage the splendor of Egypt, and all her masses shall be wiped out. I will make all her cattle vanish from beside abundant waters. The feet of man shall not muddy them any more, nor shall the hosts of cattle muddy them. Then I will let their waters settle and make their rivers flow like oil, declares our Father in heaven, Elohim. When I lay the land of Egypt waste, when the land is emptied of the life that filled it, when I strike down all its inhabitants, and they shall know that I am our Father in heaven. This is a dirge, and it shall be intoned. The woman of the nation shall ignore it. They shall intone it over Egypt and all her multitude, declares our Father in heaven, Elohim. In the 12th year, on the 15th day of the month, the word of our Father in heaven came to me, O mortal, wail the dirge along with the women of the mighty nations over the masses of Egypt, accompanying their descent to the lowest part of the netherworld, among those who have gone down to the pit. Whom do you surpass in beauty? Down with you and be laid to rest with the uncircumcised. They shall lie amid those slain by the sword, amid those slain by the sword. Egypt has been dragged and left with all her masses from the depths of Sheol. The mightiest of warriors speak to him. and his allies, the uncircumcised, the slain by the sword, have gone down and lie there. Assyria is dead with all her company, their graves round about, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, their graves set in the farthest recesses of the pit. All her company are round about her tomb, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, they who struck terror in the land of the living. Thereto was Elam, and all her masses round about her tomb, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, they who descended uncircumcised to the lowest part of the netherworld, who struck terror in the land of the living. Now they bear their shame with those who have gone down to the pit. They made a bed for her among the slain with all her masses. Their graves are round about her. They are all uncircumcised, slain by the sword. Though their terror was once spread over the land of the living, they bear their shame with those who have gone into the pit. They are placed among the slain, Meshech and Tubal, and all their masses are there. Their graves are round about. They are all uncircumcised, pierced through by the sword. They who once struck terror in the land of the living, and they do not lie with the fallen uncircumcised warriors who went down the shell with their battle gear, who put their swords beneath their heads and their iniquities upon their bones. For the terror of the warriors was upon the land of the living, and you too shall be shattered amid the uncircumcised, and lie among those slain by the sword. Edom is there her kings and all her chieftains who fall, who for all their might are laid among those who are slain by the sword. They too lie with the uncircumcised, and with those who have gone down to the pit. All the princes of the north and all the Sidonians are there, who went down in disgrace, and with the slain, in spite of the terror that their might inspired, and they lie uncircumcised with those who are slain by the sword, and bear their shame with those who have gone down to the pit. These Pharaoh shall see, and he shall be consoled for all his masses. Those are Pharaoh's men slain by the sword, and all his army, declares our Father in heaven Elohim. I strike terror into the land of the living. Pharaoh and all his masses are laid among the uncircumcised, along with those who were slain by the sword, said our Father in heaven Elohim. I will continue, but my phone needs more storage, so Legend, if you're watching this, I love you. Any other brothers and sisters watching this, I love you as well. May Father, my Son, Holy Spirit be with us. I'm going to go train with rings today in the gym. And just have a great, wonderful day. May Father, my Son, Holy Spirit be with us. Amen.